Hey, history scholars, this is Mr. Newcomb, and I want to continue with the discussion on topic 12, the Great Depression and the Americas. This will be part three, so we're going to focus on Canada and look at the causes of that Great Depression and the approaches of two prime ministers, Mackenzie King and uh, R.B. Bennett. Causes of the Great Depression in Canada are very similar to that in the United States. Simply a collapse in the prices for staple exports, and that is the agricultural sector. Of course, they are hurt by the high tariffs that are starting to be placed in other countries. Overproduction can apply to both agriculture and industrial sector as well, not paying attention to law of supply and demand. Stock market crash in the United States has an impact in Canada because of some of the companies have headquarters in the United States or companies are affiliated with companies in the United States, and stock market, when it crashed in the United States, has that ripple effect there. And then the fall in industrial production as well. Same thing that we saw in the United States. The effects of the Great Depression are going to be also very similar. We see the fall in demand because of purchasing power has gone away. Human costs here, unemployment, and psychological effects uh, will be found throughout Canada and vary from province to province, but still overall, there's going to be a human cost here. And then the need for relief. And very much like the United States, the Canadian government has to determine how much is the federal government going to get involved in the need or the relief process. Now, Mackenzie King, he will be prime minister at two times for Canada during this very difficult time period. They're not consecutive, and so the first term, his lack of response is going to indicate why he gets out of office, but then his successor does not do quite as well, and so then he is going to have an opportunity to come back here. In that first term, from 1925 to 1930, the crash does happen. The Depression does begin. When we look at his philosophy is very similar to that of Herbert Hoover and the other conservative Republican presidents of the 1920s, in that it's more laissez-faire, less government involved in the economic sector here. And so he maintained this idea of a balanced budget, have to be careful on how much relief the federal government gives to the various provinces, and so limit government role here. That was not necessarily a popular decision, as Canadians needed relief from this economic crisis, and so his party loses majority, and that meant a new prime minister. In that case, it was going to be R.B. Bennett, and next slide will focus on R.B. Bennett. When Mackenzie King does come back to power in 1935, he has a different philosophy. He moves away from this idea of a balanced budget and limited role to a more active federal role now in getting Canada out of the Great Depression. Increased trade with the United States, realizing the two economies are tied. Increased federal government spending because needs to get that relief out there, need to get some type of recovery going, and federal spending was going to be it. The Rolwell-Syros Commission took a look at the relationship between the federal government and the provincial governments, which would be very similar to what we'll say the state governments here in the United States, and take a look at roles and responsibilities, and if the provincial governments couldn't provide, maybe the federal government could. Really what this commission is setting up is a stronger central or federal government in Canada, uh, and puts them more into this uh, new direction, this new approach to government that we see happening around this time, like in the United States. Even our federal government gets much stronger during the Great Depression through the actions of either the president or through Congress. And then World War II ultimately is going to get Canada out of the Great Depression. So again, the measures of Mackenzie King and R.B. Bennett, they may provide the relief and the reform needed, but the recovery is going to come from World War II. R.B. Bennett will take over in 1930. So remember, Mackenzie King had 2 terms, separated though, and R.B. Bennett is right there in the middle here, 1930 to 1935. His philosophy, in some regards, is similar to FDR, in that federal government needs to be more active here, but he was holding back, one would say. So he wasn't full in. So when we look at some of the measures, unemployment and Farm Relief Act of 1931, Public Works Construction Act, the Farmers Credit Arrangement Act, and relief camps, all those were designed to create short-term jobs, short-term relief measures for various sectors in the economy here, whether it was farming or industrial, the industrial sector. And then the relief camps are, I guess, would be very similar to like our Civilian Conservation Corps in the United States. These relief camps would be in various provinces, with the idea of putting unemployed workers in there, and then they can do some type of public works jobs. Again, state park or creating parks and cleaning up river systems, building some infrastructure and stuff like that. Trade and tariff needs to be addressed as well. He does do one countermeasure here when we talk about increased tariffs, and so in trying to insulate the Canadian economy from being flooded by foreign goods, probably not going to be the best measure here, but imperial preferences, basically meaning inside the British Commonwealth, they're going to get preference over, let's say, a country outside of it, like the United States or Mexico. Rewind a little bit here. He is going to increase trade with the United States. So when we talk about the imperial preferences, again, it's like if you're in the British Commonwealth, you're going to get the trade deals more than someone who's not, with the exception of the United States, since we are the neighbor to the south of them. And then the growth in government responsibility here. We have some new nationalization of measures being put in place here, like the National Broadcasting Service, so a way to communicate, and then the Central Banking of Canada, very similar to our Federal Reserve banking system that we have in the United States. So we've got some changes going on in Canada, however, just doesn't have the success that the New Deal does in the United States. As the elections were approaching in 1935, he did propose Canadians a new Canadian New Deal, but it fails to materialize, and as a result of that, he will lose the election to Mackenzie King. And I've talked a little bit about Mackenzie King in the previous slide in his second term. So with that, that's the end of part 3 here, as well as the end of topic 12, the Great Depression and the Americas. You will find this on paper 3. Sometimes you will see the questions look at, on paper 3 exam, look at causes of the Great Depression and maybe compare that, the United States with Canada, and same thing with approach of some of the leaders in how they solved the Great Depression, whether it is looking at the approach of Hoover, Roosevelt, Bennett, and King, having you compare 2 of those 4, Can also take a look at the New Deal legislation and to what extent did it help end the Great Depression, or take a look at critics of the New Deal. And sometimes there's one that deals with the impact of the Great Depression on various groups, minority groups, and women. So hopefully in part one, part two, part three, you've got enough information there that can help you successfully answer one of those types of questions.